The morning air on Cheonrim 7 smelled like wet earth and something sweet that Do-hyun could never quite name. He stood in the middle of Rimtown's market, surrounded by noise and chaos. Aliens of every shape and size shouted in languages he barely understood. The market was a mess of colorful tents, strange smells, and suspicious deals. Do-hyun hated coming here. He was a simple man who cut down trees for a living. His cabin was 2 hours away in the deep forest where things were quiet and made sense. But his equipment hauler had broken down last week and he needed parts. More than that, he needed someone to help carry supplies through the thick forest paths where his truck could not go. He was not looking to buy a worker. The thought made him uncomfortable, but hiring day laborers in Rimtown was dangerous. They stole from you or disappeared halfway through the job. Everyone said the same thing. If you needed reliable help on the frontier, you bought a work contract from the slave markets. Do-hyun walked through the market with his hands in his pockets. His beard was thick and his clothes were worn from years of hard work. People moved out of his way. Humans had a reputation on the frontier. They were tough, unpredictable, and best left alone. He was looking at replacement parts for his hauler when he heard the sound. A sharp crack like wood breaking, then a small cry of pain. Do-hyun turned his head toward the noise. In a corner of the market, a large alien was beating something small and hooded. The alien was a Vorthax, all scales and muscle, nearly 7 feet tall. He held a thick stick in one hand and was bringing it down again and again on a small figure curled up on the ground. Do-hyun felt his jaw tighten. He knew he should walk away. This was not his business. The frontier had its own rules, and interfering with another trader's property could get you killed. But his feet were already moving before his brain caught up. The Vorthax raised his stick again. Do-hyun grabbed his wrist mid-swing. The alien spun around, his yellow eyes filled with anger. The merchant named Krell hissed in broken galactic standard. His words were harsh and fast. What was Do-hyun doing? This was his property. The creature on the ground was worthless, stupid, would not work. Deserved punishment. Do-hyun did not let go of the wrist. He looked down at the small figure. It was covered in a rough burlap sack that hid everything except small bare feet that were bruised and dirty. The figure was shaking. Something in Do-hyun's chest twisted. He looked back at Krell and spoke slowly in standard. If the creature was so worthless, then Krell should sell it. Do-hyun would take it off his hands. Krell's anger changed to interest. He named a price. It was high, meant to insult. Do-hyun knew he was being robbed, but he did not care. He pulled out his credit chit and transferred the amount. Krell's eyes widened. He had expected Do-hyun to argue, to walk away. Instead, the human had just bought a broken slave without even looking at it properly. Krell grabbed the small figure by the sack and shoved it toward Do-hyun. He warned the human not to come back when the creature died or ran away. Goblins were stupid things, barely worth the food you gave them. Do-hyun caught the figure before it fell. It was so light, like holding a child. He guided it gently toward his truck, keeping his hand on its thin shoulder. The figure did not resist, did not try to run. It just walked where he directed, like it had given up on everything. His truck was parked at the edge of the market. It was old and battered, held together with repairs and hope. Do-hyun opened the passenger door and helped the hooded figure inside. He made sure the seatbelt was fastened before closing the door carefully. The drive back to his cabin took 2 hours. The forest roads were rough and winding. Massive red trees rose on both sides, their branches blocking out most of the sky. Strange bird calls echoed through the canopy. Cheonrim 7 was beautiful in a wild, dangerous way. Do-hyun drove slowly. He kept glancing at his passenger. The figure sat perfectly still, hands folded in its lap under the sack. It had not made a sound since they left the market. Do-hyun cleared his throat. He started talking, his voice low and calm. He told the figure where they were going. His cabin was deep in the forest, away from towns and markets. It was quiet there, safe. He would not hurt her. He said that part twice, not sure if she understood. He talked about the forest, about the work he did, about how the trees on this moon were strange and beautiful. He told her about the small garden he tried to keep, though most earth plants did not grow well here. He was rambling, he knew, but the silence felt too heavy. The figure's trembling slowly stopped as he talked. That was something, at least. When they finally reached the cabin, the sun was starting to set. The forest glowed with soft blue and green light from the bioluminescent plants that grew everywhere. Do-hyun parked the truck and got out. He walked around and opened the passenger door. The figure did not move. Do-hyun waited patiently. After a long moment, small hands reached up and unfastened the seatbelt. The figure climbed down carefully, still covered by the sack. Do-hyun led her toward the cabin. His home was simple but solid. He had built it himself from local wood. One large room served as kitchen, bedroom, and living space. There was a bathroom in the back and a small storage area for his tools. It was not much, but it was warm and dry. Do-hyun guided her to a chair by the table. He moved to the kitchen area and started preparing food. Nothing fancy, just stew he had made yesterday. He heated it up and poured 2 bowls. He set one in front of her and one at his own seat. Then he sat down and started eating. He did not tell her to eat. He did not demand she remove the sack. He just ate his own food quietly, giving her time and space. Minutes passed. The only sound was the crackling of the fire in the stove and the distant calls of night creatures outside. Do-hyun finished his bowl and got up to clean it. He filled a cup with water and set it near her untouched bowl. "When you are ready," he said softly, "you can eat. You can take off the hood whenever you want. Nobody will hurt you here." He moved to the other side of the room to give her privacy. He busied himself with organizing his tools, his back turned. He heard nothing for a long time. Then, very quietly, he heard the sound of the spoon touching the bowl, the soft sound of eating. He did not turn around. More time passed. Do-hyun was genuinely focused on sorting through some broken equipment when he heard movement behind him. He turned slowly. The sack lay on the floor beside the chair. Standing near the table was a small figure, barely 4 feet tall. She was not a goblin. She had skin with a soft greenish tint like new leaves in spring. Her hair was dark but streaked with deep green, falling past her shoulders. Her eyes were large and luminous, golden with flecks that seemed to glow in the firelight. Her ears were slightly pointed. Along her thin arms and collarbone, faint patterns glowed with soft bioluminescence, pulsing gently like a slow heartbeat. She was painfully thin, covered in bruises and cuts. Her clothes were rags, but there was something in the way she stood, something in her eyes that spoke of dignity even in her broken state. Do-hyun stared. He had no idea what species she was. He had been on Cheonrim 7 for 8 years and never seen anything like her. She looked back at him with those glowing eyes. When she spoke, her voice was soft but clear. She spoke in perfect galactic standard, better than most traders in Rimtown. "Thank you," she said simply. Then her eyes rolled back and she collapsed. Do-hyun moved fast. He caught her before she hit the floor. She weighed almost nothing. He carried her carefully to his bed and laid her down gently. He checked her pulse. It was there, weak but steady. She had just fainted from exhaustion and fear. He covered her with his blanket and pulled a chair close to the bed. He sat down heavily, running his hands through his hair. What had he just bought? Who was she? And why had that merchant been so eager to sell her? Outside, the forest glowed with bioluminescent light. Inside, a lonely lumberjack watched over a mysterious alien girl and wondered what kind of trouble he had just brought into his quiet life. The research station rose from the mountain ridge like a metal fortress. It was built into the rock itself, with only the upper levels visible. Everything else was underground, protected by layers of stone and security systems. It looked exactly like what it was, a place with secrets to hide. Dae-hyun landed the shuttle 5 kilometers away in a hidden valley. They could not risk getting closer. From here, they would have to go on foot. The team gathered their equipment and did final checks. Everyone was nervous. Even Junho, who usually joked about everything, was quiet. Moran pulled up a holographic map. "Here is how it works. Hyaman will approach from the east and trigger explosions in the fuel depot at exactly 0600. That gives us a 10-minute window while security responds. Junho will hack the perimeter sensors to create a blind spot on the west side. Do-hyun, Nari, and I will enter through the maintenance access there." She pointed to a route through the facility. "The data core is 3 levels down. We get in, download everything, and get out. Simple. If something goes wrong, Dae-hyun pulls us out from the emergency landing pad on the roof." "Nothing about this is simple," Yemen muttered, "but it is all we have got." They moved into position as the sun rose. The light made the red trees glow like fire. Nari felt the forest around her. It was different from her home world, but life was life. The trees here were old and strong. They had seen things. She wished she could ask them for help, but that was a skill she had never learned properly. At exactly 6 in the morning, the world exploded. Hyman's charges went off in a chain of massive blasts that lit up the eastern perimeter. Alarms screamed. Guards rushed toward the fire. It was chaos, exactly as planned. Junho worked fast on his portable hacking device. His fingers flew over the controls. Come on, he whispered. Then the screen flashed green. We are in. Go now. Doyun, Nari, and Miran ran for the maintenance entrance. It was a small door, barely visible against the rock. Miran swiped her old access card. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then the lock clicked open. They slipped inside. The interior was all white walls and cold lighting. It looked like every corporate facility Do-hyun had ever seen. Clean, sterile, and soulless. They moved quickly through maintenance corridors following Miran's memorized route. They passed by labs and storage rooms. Through windows, Nari saw equipment she did not recognize. Machines that hummed with power. Scientists working at terminals. None of them looked up. The alarms were still going off, and everyone was focused on the emergency. They reached the stairwell leading down to the data core. Miran stopped and held up a hand. There are cameras from here. I can only loop the feed for 30 seconds before it gets noticed. When I say go, you move fast. She tapped commands into her device. The camera lights blinked. Go. They ran down 3 flights of stairs. Their boots echoed in the narrow space. Do-hyun's heart was pounding. This was the deepest part of the facility. If they got trapped down here, there would be no escape. They reached the data core level. It was a wide corridor with a massive security door at the end. The door was 3 inches of reinforced steel with biometric locks. Yunyo had said it would take him 15 minutes to crack it remotely. They did not have 15 minutes, Miran swore. They upgraded the security. My codes will not work on this. Do-hyun looked at the door, then at Nari. She was staring at the biometric scanner with an odd expression. Nari, what is it? That scanner, she said quietly. It is reading biological signatures. I can feel it scanning the air. It is looking for specific patterns, Miran understood first. They use Silvari biodata in the system. If Nari scans, it might recognize her. Or it might trigger every alarm in the building, Do-hyun said. It is too risky. We do not have another choice, Nari said. She walked up to the scanner and placed her hand on it. The device hummed. Light played over her skin, reading the unique patterns of her biology. Her bioluminescent marks glowed in response. For 3 endless seconds, nothing happened. Then the door clicked and slid open. The system had recognized her as authorized personnel, someone with high-level access. Apparently, being a princess had some advantages even in a place like this. They rushed into the data core. It was a large room filled with server towers and cooling systems. The air was cold and dry. In the center was a main terminal. Miran ran to it and started working. The amount of data here is insane, she said. Give me 5 minutes. Do-hyun stood guard at the door. Nari wandered deeper into the room. Something was pulling at her senses. A feeling like a distant song or a familiar smell. It was calling to her. There, she said suddenly. Through that door. I feel them. What? Do-hyun turned to look. Other Silvari. They are here, below us. I can feel their life signatures. She looked at him with desperate eyes. We have to help them. Miran looked up from her work. That is the research level. If there are prisoners, they will be in stasis. But going down there will trigger alerts we cannot stop. We will lose our window. Nari turned to Do-hyun. Please, I cannot leave them. One of them might be my brother. I have to know. Do-hyun closed his eyes. This was the moment. They could take the data and run, complete the mission safely. Or they could risk everything to save people who might already be dead. It was a terrible choice. But when he looked at Nari's face, he knew there was really only one answer. Miran, how long until that download finishes? 3 minutes. Then we have 3 minutes to get those prisoners out. He grabbed his rifle and headed for the door Nari had pointed to. Come on, they descended another level. This area was different. It looked more like a medical facility. There were examination rooms and equipment for biological research. At the end of the corridor was a large chamber with a window. Nari ran toward it. Inside were 12 stasis pods arranged in 2 rows. Each pod held a Silvari, their bodies suspended in some kind of gel. They looked peaceful, like they were sleeping. But this was not sleep. This was storage, living beings kept like specimens in a lab. Nari pressed her hands against the glass. Her bioluminescent patterns flared bright with emotion. That 1/3 from the left. That is Taiwan. My brother. He is alive. Dohyun looked at the pods. How do we wake them? I do not know, Nari said desperately. She tried the door. It was locked. Dohyun stepped back and aimed his rifle at the lock. Stand clear. The shot was loud in the confined space. The lock shattered. They rushed inside. Alarms started screaming. Red lights flashed. They were out of time. Find the release controls, Dohyun shouted over the noise. Nari ran to a control panel. She had no idea how it worked, but she pressed buttons desperately. One of the pods hissed and started to drain. That one. Do the same for the others. They worked frantically. Pod after pod opened. The silvery inside began to wake, coughing and gasping. They were weak and confused. Dohyun grabbed one and slung them over his shoulder. We have to move now. Footsteps echoed in the corridor above. Guards were coming. Dohyun's comm crackled. Moran's voice came through. Download complete. But we have got company. Security is converging on your position. Get to the extraction point, Dohyun ordered. We will be right behind you. But they were not right behind. The Sylvari were barely conscious. They could not walk on their own. Dohyun and Nari had to carry them. They managed to get 4 up the stairs before the first guards arrived. Plasma fire lit up the stairwell. Dohyun returned fire, forcing the guards back. But more were coming. They were trapped. Then an explosion rocked the building. Junho's voice crackled over the comm. Hammond just blew the main power generator. You have got maybe 2 minutes before backup systems kick in. Move your ass, the lights went out. Emergency lighting flickered on, casting everything in red. The security doors started to unlock as the system reset. Dohyun used the confusion to push forward. They dragged the Silvery up the stairs, each step feeling like climbing a mountain. They reached the main level. Moran was waiting at the emergency exit. She took one of the unconscious Silvari. Come on, Dohyun is bringing the shuttle to the roof. They ran through corridors filled with smoke and confusion. More guards appeared. Dohyun laid down covering fire while Nari and Miran got the prisoners through. He was hit twice, his armor absorbing the shots but leaving massive bruises. They burst onto the roof just as Dohyun's shuttle screamed in for a landing. The side door was already open. Yunyo was inside, reaching out to pull people aboard. Hyemin was firing from the other side, keeping guards pinned down. Get them in, Dohyun roared. He stood at the roof access, firing down the stairwell. Guards were swarming up behind them. He could not hold them much longer. The Silvery were loaded. Moran climbed aboard. Juno shouted, Dohyun, let's go. Dohyun fired his last magazine and ran for the shuttle. Guards burst onto the roof. Plasma bolts filled the air. One caught Dohyun in the leg. He went down hard. Nari screamed. She jumped from the shuttle and ran back for him. Dohyun tried to wave her off, but she ignored him. She grabbed his arm and pulled with strength that should not have been possible for someone her size. They stumbled toward the shuttle together. More shots. Dohyun felt something hit his back. His vision blurred. Then Junho was there, grabbing them both and hauling them into the shuttle. Go, 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 Miran shouted. Dohyun did not need to be told twice. The shuttle lifted off with the door still open. Guards fired after them, but they were already too high, too fast. Morning came slowly to the forest. Pale light filtered through the red trees, and the bioluminescent plants faded as the sun rose. Inside the cabin, Nari woke with a gasp. Her heart pounded as she looked around the unfamiliar room. She was in a bed. A real bed with clean blankets. Not a cage, not a cold floor, not chained to a wall. For a moment she thought it was a dream. Then she heard humming from across the room. The human, Dohyun, was cooking something at a small stove. He had his back to her and was singing quietly in a language she did not recognize. The smell of food made her stomach twist with hunger. Nari sat up slowly. Every muscle in her body ached. She watched the human carefully, waiting for him to turn around, to give orders, to demand something. That was how it always started with her previous owners. Kindness first, then demands, then punishment when she could not meet their expectations. But Dohyun just kept cooking. He turned around with 2 plates and stopped when he saw she was awake. He smiled, and there was nothing cruel in it. Good morning, he said. I made breakfast. Nothing fancy. Hope you like eggs. These are from a bird that lives in the trees here. Not exactly like earth chickens, but close enough. He set a plate on the table and gestured to the chair. Nari climbed out of bed slowly. She was still wearing her ragged clothes. She felt dirty and ashamed standing in this clean cabin. Do-hyun seemed to notice her discomfort. He pointed to a door at the back of the cabin. There is a bathroom through there. Water works, though it takes a minute to heat up. I put some clean clothes on the counter. They will be too big, but better than what you have got. Take your time. Nari stared at him. Why was he being kind? What did he want? She opened her mouth to ask, but no words came out. Instead, she walked carefully to the bathroom door and slipped inside. The bathroom was small but functional. There was indeed a set of clothes on the counter, a simple shirt and pants that smelled like soap. Nari looked at herself in the mirror and almost cried. She looked terrible. Thin, bruised, dirty. The glowing patterns on her skin were dim from malnutrition. She washed as best she could, scrubbing away weeks of dirt and fear. The warm water felt like heaven. When she finally put on the clean clothes, they hung loose on her small frame, but they were soft and comfortable. She had not worn anything this nice in almost a year. When she came out, Do-hyun was sitting at the table reading something on a datapad. He looked up and nodded approvingly. Better? Nari nodded and sat down at the table. The food was still warm. She ate slowly, trying not to seem desperate, but she was starving. Do-hyun ate his own breakfast and did not stare at her. That alone made her want to cry. The simple act of being allowed to eat in peace felt like a gift. After breakfast, Do-hyun cleared the plates and then sat back down. He looked at her seriously. I need to ask you some questions, he said. Not because I want to control you or anything. I just need to understand what is going on. You do not have to answer if you do not want to. Nari studied his face. He seemed genuine. She had been lied to before, but something in her gut said this human was different. She took a breath and spoke. My name is Nari. I am Sylvari. Do-hyun blinked. Sylvari? I have never heard of that species. Most have not, Nari said quietly. We are few. We live in the deep forests of 3 worlds far from here. We do not travel to other systems. We keep to ourselves. That is why most species do not know about us. Do-hyun leaned forward. How did you end up in that market? Nari's hands tightened in her lap. Her bioluminescent patterns flickered with distress. Raiders came to our homeworld almost a year ago. They attacked during a sacred ceremony when all the elders and leaders were gathered in one place. Many died. Those who survived were captured. I was taken with others. We were sold to different traders across the frontier. She paused, her voice breaking slightly. Most traders thought we were just primitive forest creatures. They treated us like animals. Some were cruel. Others just did not care. I was passed from one owner to another. Each one found me useless because I did not know their work, did not understand their machines. Eventually, I ended up with Krell. Do-hyun felt anger rising in his chest. He forced himself to stay calm. You speak Galactic Standard perfectly. You are clearly intelligent. How could anyone think you were primitive? Nari gave a bitter smile. Because we do not build metal cities or fly between stars in great ships. Because we live in harmony with our forests instead of destroying them for profit. To many species, that makes us backward. They do not understand that our technology is different. We work with nature, not against it. We have culture, art, philosophy, science. But none of that matters if you do not have weapons and warships. Do-hyun was quiet for a moment. Then he asked gently, Is there anyone looking for you? Family. Nari's eyes filled with tears. She tried to hold them back but failed. I do not know. I had a brother, Taewon. He was with me when the raiders came, but we were separated. I do not know if he is alive. My mother was on the council. She might have survived or she might have died in the attack. I have no way to know. The traders kept us isolated. No communication devices. No contact with the outside galaxy. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I am supposed to be a princess. My family has led our people for generations. But what good is a title when you are alone and everyone thinks you are just a stupid forest creature? Do-hyun sat back, his mind racing. A princess. He had bought an alien princess from a slave market without knowing it. This was bigger than he had thought. Way bigger. He looked at Nari, really looked at her. She was small and scared, but there was strength in her eyes, a determination that had kept her alive through months of horror. Okay, he said finally. Here is what we are going to do. First, you are not my slave. I do not believe in that. You are free to leave whenever you want. Second, if you want to stay here while we figure out how to contact your people, you can. I live alone and there is plenty of room. Third, if you stay, you are a guest, not a worker. You do not owe me anything. Nari stared at him like he was speaking a foreign language. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this? You do not know me. I cannot pay you. I have nothing to offer." Do-hyun shrugged. "Because it is the right thing to do. Because nobody should be treated the way you were treated. And because I know what it is like to lose everything and feel alone." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the forest. "I came here 8 years ago," he said quietly. "Back on Earth, I had a wife and a daughter. There was an accident at the factory where my wife worked. Safety regulations were ignored because they cost too much money. The building collapsed. She died along with 47 other workers. My daughter got sick afterward from grief. She died 6 months later." His voice was rough. "I could not stay on Earth after that. Every street, every building reminded me of them. So I came out here to the frontier, found this moon, built this cabin, and started cutting trees. It is quiet, simple, nobody asks questions." He turned back to face her. "Humans are good at surviving. We adapt. We build new lives even in terrible places. But we also remember what it is like to suffer. So when I see someone suffering, I cannot just walk away. Maybe that makes me stupid, but that is how I am built." Nari felt something shift in her chest. She had been taught that humans were dangerous. Other species spoke of them with fear. They said humans were violent, unpredictable, and only cared about conquest and profit. But this human, standing in his simple cabin in the middle of nowhere, had shown her more kindness in one day than she had experienced in a year of captivity. "Thank you," she said softly. "I will stay if you truly mean it. At least until I can find my people." Do-hyun smiled. "Good. Now let me show you around. The cabin is not much, but it is home." Over the next 2 weeks, a strange routine developed. Do-hyun went out each day to work on his logging contracts, cutting and processing the valuable red trees that grew in the forest. Nari stayed at the cabin, gradually regaining her strength. Do-hyun never demanded work from her, but Nari could not sit idle. She started cleaning the cabin, organizing things, even attempting to cook using the strange earth recipes Do-hyun taught her. She was terrible at it at first, but Do-hyun never complained. He ate her burned meals with the same appreciation he showed for good food. In the evenings, they talked. Do-hyun told her about Earth, about its cities and oceans and billions of people. He told her about human history, about the wars and struggles and the slow climb to the stars. Nari told him about the Sylvari, about their deep connection to forest worlds, about their biotechnology that could grow buildings from living trees, and their philosophical debates that lasted for generations. Trust grew slowly between them. Nari stopped flinching when Do-hyun moved too quickly. She began to laugh at his terrible jokes. She even started going outside, feeling the forest around her. The trees here were different from her homeworld, but they still sang to her in ways she could barely explain. Her bioluminescent patterns grew brighter as she healed. One evening, as they sat on the cabin's small porch watching the forest glow in the twilight, Nari said something that surprised both of them. "I was wrong about humans," she said quietly. "We were told you were monsters, conquerors who destroyed everything you touched. But you are not monsters. You are just people trying to survive like everyone else. Maybe you are better at it than most." Do-hyun looked out at the glowing forest and smiled, say. 3 weeks passed in peaceful routine. Nari grew stronger each day. Her thin frame filled out with regular meals, and her bioluminescent patterns glowed bright and steady. She learned to help Do-hyun with his work, not as a servant but as a partner. She was surprisingly good with the technical equipment, understanding the machines faster than Do-hyun had expected. But peace never lasts forever on the frontier. It started with small things. Do-hyun noticed boot prints near his property line, prints that were not his own. They were too large and the tread pattern was military grade. He mentioned it to Nari, but did not want to alarm her. "Probably just another logger passing through," he said, but he did not believe it himself. The next day, one of his motion sensors triggered in the middle of the night. Do-hyun grabbed his rifle and went outside to check. He found nothing. The sensor showed something large had moved through the area, but the forest was empty and quiet. Too quiet. Even the usual night sounds of birds and insects were gone. Nari felt it too. The trees around the cabin felt wrong to her. She had a connection to forests that she could not quite explain, even to Do-hyun. It was like the trees were whispering warnings that she could almost understand. Something was coming. Something bad. On the third day, a piece of equipment went missing from Do-hyun's worksite. It was a small plasma torch used for cutting through tough wood. Not valuable enough to be worth stealing, unless someone needed a weapon. Do-hyun knew then that they were being watched. He sat Nari down that evening and spoke seriously. I think someone is looking for you. We need to be ready. If they come, I need you to hide in the storage cellar under the cabin. There is a tunnel that leads out to the forest about 50 meters away. If shooting starts, you run and do not look back. Nari shook her head firmly. I will not leave you to fight alone. Do-hyun started to argue, but the look in her eyes stopped him. She had been running and hiding for a year. She was done with that. He sighed and nodded. Then we fight together. But you do exactly what I say when I say it. Deal? Deal, Nari agreed. They prepared as best they could. Do-hyun set up additional sensors and rigged some of his logging equipment to serve as improvised defenses. He showed Nari how to use the comm system to call for help if needed, though out here help was hours away at best. The attack came 2 days later in late afternoon. Do-hyun was outside working on his main cutting laser when he heard Nari scream. He spun around just as a plasma bolt seared through the air, missing his head by inches. The shot scorched the tree trunk behind him, leaving a smoking black mark. Do-hyun dove behind his equipment hauler and pulled his rifle from its rack. 3 figures emerged from the tree line. 2 were Krellian soldiers, heavily armored and carrying military-grade plasma rifles. The third was human, a woman with cold eyes and predator movements. She carried 2 pistols and moved like someone who knew exactly how to use them. The human woman called out in perfect galactic standard. Her voice was calm and professional. We are authorized bounty hunters retrieving stolen property. Send out the Sylvari and nobody has to die today. Do-hyun shouted back from cover. She is not property, and you are trespassing. Leave now. The woman sighed, like this was a boring conversation. Look, I get it. You bought her fair and square. But you bought stolen goods. That makes her our business. We can do this easy or hard. Your choice. Do-hyun's answer was to trigger the cutting laser he had been working on. The massive industrial beam sliced through the air, forcing the mercenaries to scatter. The fight was on. Plasma bolts flew in both directions. Do-hyun used his knowledge of the area to his advantage, moving between equipment and using his tools as weapons. He activated his log hauler, sending a massive tree trunk rolling toward one of the Krellians. The alien had to dive aside, cursing in his native language. The human bounty hunter, whose name was Ji-won, was the dangerous one. She moved smart, using cover and flanking positions. Her shots were precise, forcing Do-hyun to stay pinned down. She was a professional, and it showed. Inside the cabin, Nari watched through the window, her heart pounding. She could feel the forest around her responding to her fear. The trees were agitated, their branches moving in ways that had nothing to do with wind. She did not fully understand her connection to the forest, but in this moment of terror, something awakened in her. One of the Krellians moved toward the cabin. Nari closed her eyes and reached out with her mind, the way her mother had tried to teach her years ago. The forest answered. A massive root suddenly lifted from the ground, catching the Krellian's foot. He stumbled and fell hard. Before he could get up, a branch swung down and smacked his helmet, not enough to kill, but enough to stun. Outside, Do-hyun was fighting like a man possessed. He was not a trained soldier, but he was creative and desperate. He threw everything he had at the attackers. He rigged his plasma torch to explode, creating a distraction. He used his logging chains to trip the second Krellian, then brought a heavy piece of equipment down on the alien's weapon, shattering it. But Ji-won was still coming. She flanked around and got a clear shot at Do-hyun. He was exposed, his rifle jammed from dirt. This was it. He saw her finger tighten on the trigger. Then the forest exploded with light. Every bioluminescent plant within 50 meters suddenly flared bright as day. Ji-won flinched, momentarily blinded. It was enough. Do-hyun lunged forward and tackled her. They went down in a tangle of limbs, fighting for control of her weapons. Do-hyun was bigger and stronger, but Ji-won was trained. She broke his hold and rolled away, coming up with one pistol aimed at his chest. They froze, both breathing hard. Behind her, one Krellian was unconscious, tangled in roots. The other was limping badly, his weapon destroyed. The clearing was a mess of broken equipment and smoking craters. Jiwan looked around and seemed to come to a decision. She lowered her pistol slightly. "You are either very brave or very stupid," she said to Do-hyun. "Probably both. We are leaving. But you need to know what you are protecting." Do-hyun stayed ready to move. "What are you talking about?" Jiwan gestured to her wounded partner. "That Sylvari girl is not just some random slave, she is royalty. And there is a massive corporation called the Tajin Syndicate that wants her dead. Not captured. Dead. They have been systematically eliminating the Sylvari for the past 3 years. Why? Do-hyun demanded. Because the Sylvari homeworlds are sitting on deposits worth trillions. Rare minerals, unique biotechnology, forests that produce materials you cannot get anywhere else. But galactic law protects inhabited worlds. You cannot just take them. So the Syndicate found a workaround. Make it look like the Sylvari are going extinct naturally. Kill them quietly. Make it seem like accidents or tribal conflicts. Once the population drops below the legal threshold, the worlds become open territory. Do-hyun felt sick. "You are helping them do this?" Jiwon shook her head. "I take contracts. I did not ask questions. But I am asking now." The Syndicate said this was about retrieving stolen property. They did not say anything about genocide. "I have done a lot of things for money, but I do not kill entire species." She holstered her pistol. "Consider this your warning. More will come. The Syndicate has deep pockets and no conscience. If you keep that girl, you are marking yourself for death. My advice? Take her to the Galactic Council, get it on record, and hope someone actually cares." "Why are you telling me this?" Do-hyun asked. Jiwon picked up her second pistol from where it had fallen. "Because you fought like hell for someone you barely know. That is either stupid or honorable. Either way, you deserve to know what you are up against. Plus, I do not like being lied to. The Syndicate owes me for this mess." She helped her injured partner to his feet and started dragging the unconscious one toward the tree line. She looked back once. "Good luck, human. You are going to need it." Then they were gone, disappearing into the forest. Do-hyun stood alone in the ruined clearing, his whole body shaking from adrenaline. The cabin door opened and Nari ran out. She threw her arms around him, and he held her tight. "Are you hurt?" she asked, her voice muffled against his chest. "No," he said, "but we have a big problem." He told her everything Jiwon had said. Nari listened with growing horror. It all made sense now. The raid on her homeworld. The way she and other Sylvari had been scattered across the frontier. The fact that nobody seemed to be looking for them. It was all planned. Her people were being murdered and nobody knew. They stood together in the twilight, surrounded by the glowing forest and the wreckage of the fight. Nari looked up at Do-hyun with determination in her eyes. "We have to fight back," she said. "We have to expose them. We have to save my people." Do-hyun looked down at this small, fierce alien woman who had somehow become important to him in just a few short weeks. He thought about the easy thing to do, which would be to take her to the nearest council station and hand over the problem to someone else. Then he thought about his wife and daughter, about injustice and corporate greed, about all the times he had wished someone had fought for them. "Okay," he said simply. "Then we fight." 2 days after the attack, Do-hyun and Nari drove back to Rimtown. The cabin was too exposed now. If the Syndicate sent more hunters, they would be sitting targets. They needed allies, information, and most importantly, proof of what was happening to the Sylvari people. Rimtown looked the same as always, chaotic and dangerous. But Do-hyun saw it differently now. Hidden among the criminals and traitors were people like him. Frontier workers who had left their old lives behind. People who understood what it meant to survive when nobody cared if you lived or died. They went first to Junho's repair shop. Junho was an old friend, maybe the only real friend Do-hyun had on this moon. He was a mechanic who could fix anything from hover trucks to orbital scanners. He was also someone who hated corporations with a passion that bordered on obsession. Junho was under a broken shuttle when they arrived. All Do-hyun could see were his legs sticking out. The man rolled out on a creeper board, his face covered in grease. When he saw Do-hyun with an alien girl, his eyes widened. "You finally got yourself a girlfriend?" Hunyo said with a grin. About time. Do-hyun did not smile. "We need to talk. Somewhere private." The grin faded from Junho's face. He stood up and wiped his hands on a rag. "This way." They went to the back room where Junho did his illegal work. The kind of modifications that mining companies did not like, but frontier workers needed to survive. He locked the door and turned to face them. Do-hyun told him everything. The purchase in the market, Nari's true identity, the attack, the Tajin Syndicate's plan to eliminate the Sylvari and steal their worlds. Junho listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with every word. When Do-hyun finished, Junho was quiet for a long moment. Then he cursed violently in Korean. "Of course it is a corporation. It is always a corporation. They destroy everything for profit and nobody stops them." He looked at Nari with something like sadness. "I am sorry for what happened to your people. I lost my family to corporate greed too. Different circumstances, same result. The rich get richer and everyone else suffers. Will you help us?" Do-hyun asked. Junho nodded without hesitation. "Yes." "What do you need?" "Information, equipment, people we can trust. We need to find proof of what the syndicate is doing. Then we need to get that proof to someone who can actually do something about it." Junho rubbed his jaw, thinking, "I know some people." "Let me make some calls." Over the next few hours, people started arriving at the shop. They came quietly, one or two at a time. Junho had put out word through the Frontier Network, and those who heard responded. First came Hyemin, a hard-faced woman who used to run a mining claim until the syndicate found a legal loophole to seize it. She lost everything and now lived by smuggling goods past corporate checkpoints. She listened to the story with cold eyes and nodded. "I am in. The syndicate took my land. Time to take something from them." Next was Dae-hyun, a shuttle pilot who flew supply runs between the frontier moons. He was young but skilled, with reflexes that made him one of the best pilots in the sector. He had no personal grudge against the syndicate, but he believed in doing what was right. "Besides," he said with a shrug, "life is boring without some danger." The last to arrive was Moran. She was older, maybe 50, with gray hair and sharp eyes. She used to work for syndicate security before she saw something that made her quit. She never talked about what that something was, but it was bad enough that she turned whistleblower and went into hiding on the frontier. Miran looked at Nari for a long time. Then she spoke quietly. "I know about the Sylvari operation. I saw some of the reports before I left. The syndicate called it Project Clearcut. They were very proud of how clean they were keeping it. No messy wars, no public outcry. Just quiet elimination." She turned to the group. "If you are serious about exposing them, you need hard evidence. Internal documents, communication records, financial transactions. The kind of proof that even the Galactic Council cannot ignore. And I know where that evidence is kept." "Where?" Do-hyun asked. "There is a research station on the northern continent. Officially it is a geological survey base. Really it is the coordination center for the entire operation. All the records are stored there. If we can access their data core, we can get everything we need." Junho whistled low. "That place is a fortress. Security cameras, armed guards, biometric locks. How are we supposed to get in?" Miran smiled grimly. "I still have my old access codes. Some of them might still work. And I know the patrol schedules. We have a chance, small but real." The group looked at each other. None of them were soldiers or spies. They were just ordinary people who had been pushed too far. But sometimes ordinary people could do extraordinary things when they had no other choice. While the humans planned, Nari sat quietly in the corner. She felt useless. These people were risking everything to help her and her people. But what could she do? She was not a fighter or a hacker. She was just a princess without a kingdom. Do-hyun noticed her distress. He came over and sat beside her. "You okay?" "I feel helpless," she admitted. "Everyone is doing so much and I can do nothing." "That is not true," Do-hyun said. "We need you. If there are other Sylvari being held at that facility, you might be able to sense them. Your people have that connection to living things, right? That could be the difference between a successful mission and a disaster." Nari had not thought of that. She nodded slowly. "Maybe. My mother could sense other Sylvari from far away. I never learned how properly, but I might be able to feel them if they are close. Then you are coming with us, Do-hyun said firmly. The planning continued late into the night. They went over maps of the research station. Miran sketched out the interior layout from memory. Junho listed the equipment they would need. Yemen suggested ways to create distractions. Daehyun calculated flight paths and escape routes. At one point, Daehyun asked the question that was on everyone's mind. Why are we doing this? I mean, really? Most of us never heard of the Silvery before today. We could just walk away. The room went quiet. Then Do-hyun spoke. Because if we do not, who will? The galaxy is full of people who talk about justice and law and doing the right thing. But when it actually matters, when lives are on the line, most of them look the other way. It is too complicated, too expensive, too inconvenient. He looked around at the assembled group. We are frontier people. We came out here because we did not fit in the civilized worlds. Because we wanted something different. Well, this is different. This is a chance to actually matter. To save lives. To prove that we are more than just outcasts and criminals. Junho laughed and raised his cup of terrible coffee. To being outcasts who give a damn. The others raised their own cups. Even Nari joined in, feeling something warm in her chest. These humans barely knew her, but they were willing to risk everything because it was right. She had been wrong about humans. Very wrong. They spent 2 more days preparing. Junho gathered equipment and weapons. Hyaman secured explosives and created fake identification. Daehyun prepped his shuttle and plotted emergency escape routes. Miran drilled everyone on the station layout until they could navigate it blindfolded. Nari trained with Do-hyun, learning basic self-defense and how to use a comm device. She also practiced reaching out with her senses, trying to feel for other Sylvari. It was difficult. Her training had been interrupted when she was young, and she had not used these abilities in months. But slowly she felt the old connection stirring. On the night before the mission, the group gathered one last time. They went over the plan again. Hyaman would create a distraction with explosions on the outer perimeter. Junho would hack the security systems. Do-hyun, Nari, and Miran would infiltrate the main building and reach the data core. Daehyun would wait with the shuttle for fast extraction. It was a good plan. But everyone knew that good plans rarely survived contact with reality. Miran looked at each of them seriously. This is dangerous. Some of us might not come back. If anyone wants to back out, now is the time. No shame in it, nobody moved. They had all made their choice. Yemen spoke up, her voice rough. I have been running from the syndicate for 3 years. Hiding. Scared. I am tired of running. Even if this kills me, at least I will die fighting. Junho nodded. I lost everything to corporate greed once. I will not let it happen to someone else without fighting back. Daehyun shrugged with a smile. I always wanted to be a hero. Figured this was my chance. Miran just nodded. She had already made her stand when she became a whistleblower. This was just continuing what she started. Do-hyun looked at Nari. She met his eyes and spoke clearly. My people are dying. If there is even a small chance we can save them, I have to try. And I could not ask for better allies than all of you. The next morning, they loaded into Daehyun's shuttle and headed north toward the research station. The sun was rising over the red forest, painting everything in shades of crimson and gold. It was beautiful. Nari wondered if she would see another sunrise. Do-hyun sat beside her, checking his rifle for the 10th time. She reached over and took his hand. He looked surprised, then squeezed back gently. Whatever happened next, they would face it together.